Then there are next, breeds that stop being just dogs and become something more, a symbol, an idea, a legend. The Doberman was one of those three. For decades, its name was synonymous with power, discipline, control, and protection. For many, it was the perfect dog. I challenge anyone, honestly, to look at a Doberman, one of those from the 80s, black and tan, cropped ears, docked tail, that proud stance, and to have the courage to say that it's not the most beautiful dog in the world. For others, it was the most dangerous dog in the world. But almost no one ever stopped to ask a question. Who was the Doberman really? Because if you ask 100 people today what they think about this breed, you'll always hear the same stories. It goes crazy, it turns on its owner, its brain keeps growing, it's not suitable for children, it's a vicious dog. Phrases repeated so many times that they start to sound true. And yet, almost none of these things are true. So how is that possible? How did one of the most admired breeds in history become one of the most misunderstood? How did the king lose his throne? To understand that, we have to go back, way back, to a small town in Germany. Back when the Doberman didn't even exist yet, and one man was about to change the history of dog breeding forever. Germany, in the second half of the 19th century, in a small town called Apolda. No one could have imagined that one of the most famous breeds on the planet would be born there. The man who changed everything was named Friedrich Louis Dobermann. He wasn't a famous breeder, nor was he an aristocrat. At that time, aristocrats tended to crossbreed dogs for hunting, just for pleasure. He's a working son. A man who every day has to deal with situations most people would rather avoid. He works as a tax collector, manages a slaughterhouse, catches stray dogs, and protects his jobs. In other words, he spends his life going into the wrong places, into the wrong neighborhoods, among the wrong people, sometimes with the wrong animals, and he often carries money, a lot of money with him. Now, imagine Germany at the end of the 19th century. No telephones, no patrols arriving in 2 minutes, no cameras, no alarms. If someone decides to attack you, you're on your own. And that's where the idea is born. A simple idea, but for the time, incredibly revolutionary. Louis Doberman wants a dog, not just any dog, but a companion, a guardian, an ally. An animal capable of walking beside him in the dark. Many years later, someone would say that the Doberman was born to inspire fear. Careful, I actually believe it's the exact opposite. The Doberman was born out of fear. The fear of a man searching for protection, for safety, for someone he could trust in a world where you couldn't trust anyone. And so he began to select, to choose, to crossbreed, to build. He isn't creating a monster. He's trying to build a solution to make it work. He takes the best he can find for that time, butcher's dogs, ancestors of what we now recognize as Rottweilers, shepherd dogs from Thuringia, German pinschers, working lines, guard lines, protection lines. Each dog contributes something. Small ones: strength, courage, speed, toughness, vigilance, intelligence, but above all, balance. Because the real problem isn't creating a dog that bites. That's easy. The real problem is creating a dog that knows when to bite. And here's something a lot of people have never understood. The Segu protection dog isn't a bomb. It's a switch. It turns on when needed. It turns off when needed. Some would say it lights up when needed. It shuts off when it must. A dog that attacks anyone isn't a working dog, it's a problem. Louis Doberman didn't want a problem. He wanted a solution. Years go by, the selection continues, the breed takes shape, the body becomes athletic, the lines elegant, the gaze alert, the reactions quick. Back then, we had what today many consider the Malinois, but taken to the next level, something the world had never seen before. If the German Shepherd looks like it was born from the earth, the Doberman looks like it was born from a divine design, from water to the sea. It looks like it was drawn, and I know you're thinking that. I know that deep down, even you, just a little bit like me, think it was the most beautiful dog of all time. It looks engineered. It seems like it comes from the future. That's exactly its modernity. That's what will make it first a legend and then a cautionary tale. Because the incredible thing is this: the Doberman won't be destroyed by its flaws, it will be destroyed by the very qualities that made it famous. And to understand how that happened, we need to witness its rise. We need to see the moment when the dog becomes a myth. There are specific dog breeds that are brought into existence, breeds that proliferate across the globe, and then there are those unique breeds that completely captivate the collective imagination of people everywhere. The Doberman belongs to this last category because its success wasn't just about dog lovers, it was a cultural phenomenon. To understand how big it was, you have to forget about today's world. Forget Instagram, forget TikTok, forget the internet. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a breed's reputation was built differently through passports, newspapers, television, and movies. And the Doberman seemed born to dominate all of these arenas. Look at me. Lean body, deep chest, elegant neck, athletic movement, alert gaze. He doesn't look like a dog shaped by nature. He looks like a dog designed by the divine, like a machine, a work of design. And the world noticed it, and noticed it very, very quickly. While other breeds remained tied to their original work, the Doberman became something different. I am the symbol. The dog of protection, the dog of authority, the dog of security, the dog that made you feel protected just by being there. Many people today believe that the Doberman has always been a controversial breed. It is not true. It is not true. For many years, the Doberman was admired, desired, sought after, even envied. Owning a Doberman meant transmitting a message. Competence, strength, reliability, control. And then come the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Opinions lie. The numbers don't. In the 1970s in Italy, there were just a few hundred Dobermans registered. Then something happens, something huge. The breed explodes and spreads. Registrations grow year after year, reaching over 6,000 registered dogs. 6,000! The 70s, 70 to 80. To understand what that means, you have to picture the Italian scene back then. We're not talking about just any breed. We're talking about a superstar, one of the most sought-after breeds in the country. Basically, if you take a Border Collie today and a Malinois, put them together, you'd get the kind of sales numbers for a dog that seemed like it would never go out of style. But success always brings a problem. Always. When a breed becomes famous, it stops belonging to the true enthusiasts, to those who really care, to those who know how to tell its story. And that's where the story starts to change, because the public doesn't love reality. Just like today, people love symbols, they love characters, they love simplifications, and the Doberman was destined to become the perfect simplification. Movies come out, TV lessons come out, ads come out, photos come out, Hollywood arrives, and Hollywood immediately understands one thing: the Doberman jumps off the screen. There's no need to explain who he is, no need to tell a story, just show him. You have to tell the story of the German Shepherd through Rin Tin Tin, the Collie through Lassie. With the Doberman, you don't need to tell his story, just look at him. 2 eyes, a gait. Behind it, there's him. A dash or a growl. It's a message that comes across instantly. The problem is that Hollywood almost never tells the truth. Hollywood tells what works, and what works is conflict, danger, threat, fear. So the Doberman slowly stops being a dog and becomes a character. A character with a bad reputation. What does character mean? When you play a character, you develop a character. It's like your own version of yourself, but he's a victim of it. His character, the one others have created for him, is the criminal's dog, the boss's dog, the drug dealer's dog, the armored van's dog, the villain's dog, and that's where the problem starts. Because when the character becomes more famous than reality, reality starts to lose. But the worst is yet to come, because Hollywood won't be the real or only enemy of the doppelganger. Not even competition from other breeds. Not even the changing structure of society. The real enemy will come in the form of something seemingly harmless. A story, a simple story, told by someone, then repeated by someone else, and then by yet another person, until it becomes a truth, but one that would forever change the fate of the Doberman. The unfortunate decline of the Doberman did not actually begin with a disease. It did not begin with another competing dog breed. It did not begin with a new law. It actually started with a deceptive and fabricated lie. If we had to choose the exact moment when the fate of the Doberman began to change, many would think of a disease, others of the movies, or of hip dysplasia. I believe it started much earlier. I think it began with a story told by someone, then repeated by someone else, and then by yet another person. Dogs can't talk, so these things eventually become accepted as truth. The incredible thing is that the internet didn't exist, Facebook didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist, TikTok didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, and yet fake news already existed. Oh, they definitely existed. They traveled through bars, schools, barracks, courtyards, between neighbors, and every time they got bigger, more absurd, more frightening, until a dog became an NEA legend. The growing brain, come on, you've heard that one, I know you have. This is probably the most widespread urban legend in the history of dog culture. If you're over 40, or if not, we'll tell it to you here on this channel. Have you heard it? If you're over 50, you've definitely heard it. Maybe from a relative, maybe from a friend, maybe from someone who was convinced they knew what they were talking about, like when people say, I know about dogs and wolves. As if the German Shepherd could turn into a wolf. But that one never became accepted as truth. This one, though, did become accepted as truth. The Doberman's brain keeps growing, or the skull shrinks, and when it reaches a certain age, it goes crazy. And only God knows how many times we've heard this story. It's perfect. It explains everything. If the dog bites, it's the brain. If the dog is nervous, it's the brain. If the dog is unmanageable, it's the brain. That way, no one has to ask the more uncomfortable question. What if it's actually the human's fault? The reality is much less like a movie. A lot less fascinating, but infinitely more true. There is no scientific evidence whatsoever that the Doberman's brain keeps growing until it drives him mad. None, zero, nothing, it has never existed. And yet, this story has probably turned more people away from the breed than any genetic disease ever has. Think about it. An entire breed judged for decades based on an anatomical fairy tale. At 7 years old, it turns against its owner. This, I think, was the second version, like some kind of curse. In this way, it's biological, a ticking time bomb ready to go off. The Doberman is as fragile as a package bomb. At 7 years old, it explodes. The story changed slightly from region to region, but the ending was always the same. Once it reached a certain age, it would turn on you and attack. Now, let's pause for a second. If this were true, the breed would have disappeared 100 years ago. No breeder would have kept selecting it, no law enforcement would have used it, no family would have chosen it, and no enthusiast would have wanted it. No one would have fallen in love with it. I wouldn't be here talking about it, but instead, the Doberman is still here. Because the reality is simple. A dog can have problems, it can be poorly trained, poorly bred, poorly managed, it can suffer, it can react, it can act out, but there is no magical moment when a Doberman betrays its owner. That's just a story, not real dog knowledge. Lie number 3. It can't be around children. This one was devastating. It was the ticking time bomb that ended the Doberman breed, because it didn't just hurt its image, it hit families. For years, thousands of people heard that the Doberman was incompatible with children, that it was too tough, too nervous, too dangerous, just too much of everything. And yet, all you have to do is read the official breed standard, not the rumors, where the Doberman is described as an affectionate dog, devoted to its family, and fond of children. This doesn't mean that every Doberman should be a babysitter. It doesn't mean that education and responsibility aren't needed, but it does mean something important. The breed wasn't created to be against children. The breed was created to be alongside people, and children are people, just little people. Lie number 4, it's evil by nature. This is the mother of all lies, the one that cuts you off at the knees, because it contains all the others within it. Aggressive, dangerous, violent, but there's a huge confusion here. The confusion between power and malice. A Doberman is powerful. It's pretty powerful. Just like a racehorse is powerful, just like a professional boxer is powerful, just like a Ferrari is powerful. But power isn't malice. Power isn't violence. Historically, the best protection dogs have always been the ones that are more controlled, more balanced, because a dog that loses control doesn't protect, it complicates things. A working dog needs to know how to distinguish, to help, to wait, to obey. This is exactly the quality that made the Doberman famous. Most people who talk about Dobermans have never actually met one. They've only heard stories from someone who heard it from someone else. And when a legend is repeated long enough, it stops being a legend and becomes reality in the eyes of those who listen. The problem is that the real truth still exists, and sooner or later it comes back to collect its due. But if you think it was just lies that destroyed Doberland, you're wrong, because it's not over yet. Because lies alone aren't enough. If it had only been that, maybe the breed would have been saved. Thank goodness it's still safe for now. The problem is that while the world was telling fairy tales, something else was changing, something much bigger, society itself. The Doberman hadn't changed, the world had changed, and here something happened that almost no one talks about. Because while everyone argues about aggression, ear cropping, climate, and urban legends, the real earthquake is happening somewhere else. It's happening in society. In the 70s and 80s, the world was different. Villas had gates, businesses had guards, and security was a daily concern. A lot of people wanted a dog that projected authority, that acted as a deterrent. Protection, and the Doberman was perfect for that. Then the world changes, cities change, families change. The dog is more and more a part of the home, on the couch, in restaurants, on social media. The dog no longer needs to guard the perimeter, to patrol, and suddenly, in many cases, people aren't looking for a dog that protects, they want a dog that makes things easier. But the Doberman has never been a simple dog. It's a dog that demands your presence. No less than the Malinois. Relationship, upheaval, training, movement. The market slowly starts to turn its back on it, not because it became worse, but because the world became different. But while the world was changing, someone was building the ultimate image of the Doberman. It wasn't a breeder, it wasn't a trainer, it was Hollywood. Hollywood, before anyone else, as I mentioned earlier, realizes that the Doberman is scary, or at least scary on screen. It's black, athletic, incredibly fast, silent, and with its cropped ears, it almost looks like a mythological creature, a statue come to life, a predator that begins its process film after film. series after series, scene after scene. The Doberman stops being just a dog. It becomes a character. The boss's dog, the bootlegger's dog, the criminal's dog, the dog guarding the fortified mansion. The audience no longer meets the real Doberman, they meet the cinematic Doberman. Imagine what happened with Beethoven's St. Bernard. Today, whenever someone sees a St. Bernard, they don't realize they're dealing with a huge molosser because they think they're seeing Beethoven, but that's not the case. Well, the same thing, but in a negative way, happened with Dobermans. The problem is that movies don't have to be fair, they just have to be effective, and they do that well. And with Dobermans, they're very effective. Even the imagery associated with Nazism ends up touching on them. And it's curious, because when you really study the historical images of Nazi Germany, you mostly find German Shepherds, Schnauzers, and then the Doberman comes along. And yet, in the collective imagination, the Doberman still ends up on the side of the villains because human memory doesn't remember the facts, and no image is more powerful than a Doberman running toward Mattia de Caver. But it's always too easy to blame it all on fate, too easy to blame it all on legends, too easy to blame it all on society for what, I repeat, is probably the most beautiful dog in the world, aesthetically speaking, and I'll always stand by that. I challenge anyone to honestly say otherwise. I'm not saying it's my favorite, that's something I might talk about, but I'm saying it's the most beautiful. Because there's another truth, a truth that enthusiasts know well. I think by now you understand what I'm talking about. The Doberman has paid a huge price in terms of health, a heavy burden. Dilated cardiomyopathy, the well-known DCM, a heart disease that has hit the breed extremely hard, just like hip dysplasia is affecting German Shepherds today, to give you an idea. We're not just talking nonsense here. We're not at a bar. We're not talking about fake news. We're talking about a real, documented, measurable, and dangerous problem. And this is where a breed shows its maturity. Not when problems arise, but when it faces them. To call something out doesn't mean claiming it's perfect. It means protecting the future. But not even illness could have dethroned the Doberman. It's not over. I owed this video to the Doberman because in the meantime, someone else was coming, a new king. Every empire has a successor, every sunset, a new commander. And while the world was busy going through its changes, in the world of working dogs, that name is often his. Hands in hand. Lighter, more explosive. More rugged, cheaper to keep operational, better suited to the modern needs of many units, and while the Doberman was fighting against legend, the Malinois was conquering the present. Careful, this doesn't mean the Malinois is better, it just means it meets different needs more effectively. Because the work changes, society changes, operations change, and the dogs change along with them. The Doberman isn't defeated, it's replaced, and that's very painful. At this point in the documentary, I should be showing you a monster, a killer, a war machine. That's what many people expect, but instead, I'm showing you a dog that follows its owner everywhere, a dog that seeks contact, a dog that leans on you, a dog that wants to be part of everyday life. A dog that often experiences its relationship with the family in an almost all-consuming way. The real Doberman is probably one of the most misunderstood breeds on the planet. Maybe the most misunderstood, because the public has only seen the mask, not the face. They've only known the character, not the dog. I want to make one last point. I've saved it for last because it's probably the most tragic. Do you know what has paid the highest price out of all these things? This will be the most controversial part of the documentary. Ear and tail cropping. Seeing a Doberman today with long ears and a long tail is not like seeing a Doberman from the past with cropped ears and a docked tail. In 1983, in Italy, the Doberman was registered with Waltrace in the description. In the following years, that name collapsed. Today, we are very far from that era. The king has lost his throne, the myth has lost its power, the legend has faded. And yet, the Doberman is still here. Despite so many obstacles, it hasn't disappeared, it hasn't died, it hasn't been erased. It has survived, it has gone through boogeymen, bites, movies, prejudices, diseases, social changes, and it has made it all the way to us. Maybe the Doberman didn't need to become a trend again. Maybe it just needed to go back to being what it was at the beginning. The creation of a man searching for safety in the dark. A dog built to protect, to work together, to belong. They called it a monster, a mad dog, a bad dog, the wrong dog. But those who have truly lived with a Doberman almost always tell a different story. Not the story of a legend, not the story of a nightmare, but the story of a companion. Because God's fall, it always happens. But sometimes, hidden deep under the heavy rubble of the myth, the actual truth remains. And in the specific case of the Doberman, that truth is much more beautiful than the legend ever was. I really want to take a moment to make a very special dedication. This video could easily end right here, but I truly want to dedicate this entire video to my beloved second dog, because my very first dog when I was a young child was a Cocker, as many of you already know, a beautiful Cocker Spaniel. He died tragically, as I've told many times. And when the second dog arrived a few years later, it was a Doberman. For that time period, my family did something that was really wrong. He spent his whole life in the yard, only at his old age. We started letting him inside the house, but I only began to love that dog, to really remember him, when he passed away, because he wasn't really mine. Actually, he's the incredible one who truly brought me so much closer to the wonderful and fascinating world of dogs.